Alright, welcome back to another update and forecast on the California wildfires. What we're going to do throughout the course of this video is go over the most important information, especially when it comes to the Caldor, the Dixie, and the Monument fires. But as I was just starting this video, I checked Twitter and did see that there are some new evacuation orders in place for both the Dixie Fire and the Antelope fire. So we will have to stay updated with the current information as we go throughout this video. What we're also going to do is take a very good look at the fire weather forecast, because I think that's actually the big story of this forecast today, because as you can see on this satellite imagery, conditions don't look like they usually look. And it's all of these clouds coming in, that's that thunderstorm possibility that I was talking about this morning. That's causing that red flag warning. It means there's the potential for some dry lightning, which always has the potential to start some new fires. But then even more, it can also bring some gusty winds that we are already seeing impact the fires that we already have on the ground. So throughout this video, we're going to update all the information on these fires, and then also take a very close look at how this thunderstorm and moisture moving into California, how that is interacting with the fires, and we're going to keep a close eye out and see if any new fires pop up. So first thing that I want to do here is just look at the Caldor Fire. I think we're going to do that one first because this is a live stream, and I think the big story is going to be the Dixie Fire, so it'll be nice to go over that one second, allow people some time to join the live stream. And the Caldor Fire will mostly be talking about things that happened in the past, whereas what's going on the Dixie Fire and, for example, the Antelope and Monument fires is much more current. So with all that being said, there is that red flag warning over California that, again, I believe officially started at 11, it says effective from 11 p.m. to 11 p.m., but I know one of these red flags, if we click in here, actually started at 5 p.m. I tried to start this video at 5 p.m. to be right on time with this red flag warning beginning, but either way, you can see there's red flag warning conditions over Northern California, and the main reason for that is that thunderstorm threat coming in, or not as much a threat anymore as we actually see those thunderstorms forming, which brings some gusty winds and the potential for some dry lightning. So two things we can do to just get an overview of the fires that we're going to be looking at. First thing I always like to do is look at the natural color fire. This gives you a good quick glance of where the most active spots are in California, where you see that orange color. Again, it's a little hard to see right now because there's so many thunder clouds and clouds covering Northern California, but certainly see the northern part of the Dixie Fire is active. You notice not much activity on the Caldor Fire anymore. Last time we looked at this, again, it was a while ago. I took quite a few days off just to focus on my master's thesis, but had to come back for this red flag warning. And when we last looked at the Caldor Fire, there was a large amount of heat coming off it. Not really seeing much heat coming off of it right now, although we do see that glow on the northern edge of the Dixie Fire, certainly on the Antelope Fire. That has picked up significantly throughout the day today. Again, new evacuation orders in both of those places. And then you can't see the River Complex and Monument Fire all that well because of how many clouds are over the area, but we do know those fires are active as well. Now, one other thing that I want to see just while we're on this page is what these thunderstorms actually look like as they're coming through. So earlier in the day, we just had some clouds, and then as we get into this afternoon, that's where you start to see some actual thunderstorms coming in. And at some point in this video, again, the real thunderstorms are still coming in over the next couple of hours. So throughout the course of this video, we'll take a look at a lightning tracker to see where we're picking up some lightning and if we see any new fires starting because of that lightning. But first, I do just want to zoom into the Caldor Fire. You can see that is covered by red flag conditions right now, but if we actually zoom in there, first thing I notice is much less hotspots than the last time we looked at this map. Again, how I usually look at this map, it's not perfect because the hotspots are picked up by satellites in space, so they're not exactly accurate, but it usually gives a general idea of how much growth there has been over the last 24 hours. The way you tell that is you take the fire perimeter there where you see that red shaded color, And then if you see a large amount of dots outside of that fire perimeter, that usually means that there's been a lot of fire activity in the last 24 hours. And something that you notice here is that there aren't many dots outside of that fire perimeter. It looks like we do have some activity still going on far north of Kirkwood. And then I do know that there were some spot fires down here around Highway 88 that have been causing some trouble there. But overall, Caldor Fire has significantly calmed down since the last time we were looking at. You could see that on that satellite imagery that we're looking at. Not much smoke coming off of the Caldor Fire. Not seeing much of an orange glow. One other way to see that is the GOES detections. Right where we saw those hot spots on the other map, looks like there is still some heat signature being popped up here, but much improved since the last time that we were looking at the Caldor Fire. Amazing work done by Cal Fire in this whole area. I honestly can't believe how this fire went, and that'll make more sense when we look at the Google Earth with the fire perimeter in a second. But key spots that we were watching throughout the course of this fire were Kirkwood and South Lake Tahoe. You can see how there was thousands of structures there, and right now looks like, you know, there is still some heat signatures, but if we actually zoom into those areas, you'll see the amazing job that was done by our wildland firefighters. So first thing I want to do here is let's actually turn off the current perimeter or the one from the most recent perimeter that I could find from this morning. And let's go back to September 3rd. That was the last update. Again, took quite a few days off to focus on the master's thesis, trying to wrap it up by the end of the month. And the other big story was there wasn't as much going on the Caldor Fire over the last few days with those calmer conditions. That's why I'm back now, though, with that red flag warning. We have to keep a close eye on if things are going to flare up, or with the potential for that dry lightning, if any new fires will possibly be starting. So that's what it looked like on September 3rd. Key spots to look at here are South Lake Tahoe, that area on the northern edge of the fire, and then the area north of Kirkwood. Those were the three main spots that we were watching. If we click on the most current fire perimeter, you'll notice almost no growth in the last, 6 days right there. So keeping that most current fire perimeter on, let's actually zoom into these areas, the key spots that we've been looking at. One of those key spots was Kirkwood right here. And you can see that we did get a large amount of growth towards the northeast. Again, a lot of that was due to those southwesterly winds and that last big red flag event that we were covering, where it was picking up the burning embers, leading to spot fires all along this area. But amazingly, they kept that fire perimeter out of Kirkwood right there, which is absolutely unbelievable to see. Now, one spot that in the most recent Cal Fire update they were talking about, they were seeing some challenges, was right along Highway 88 here. They said that what they've been seeing is in some of these hot areas that you see just northwest of Highway 88, sometimes a tree will torch up, and then you can imagine that creates a lot of burning embers, tosses it over Highway 88, leads to some spot fires. So I do know that that is an area of the fire where they are continuing to have some troubles, but overall nothing getting too out of hand like we were seeing in the past. So zooming up here, one of our key spots that we were watching was Wrights Lake right here. Again, the reason for that, if we go back to this map, again, even though the heat isn't exactly accurate on this map, it is useful to be able to look at where some of the structures are. There's Kirkwood down there. All those structures, those orange dots, show South Lake Tahoe. And then if we zoom in, I believe that's Wrights Lake right there. And yeah, you can see there are some structures around there, but map's having a hard time loading as of right now. So when we left off, this was the most active part of the Caldor Fire. It kept pushing up farther towards the north, but you can see very little growth over the last maybe 5 or 6 days, and it looks like they've continued to control this part of the fire, and we're seeing a reduction in that fire spread compared to what we were seeing in previous days. Now, What I think is the most amazing part of this fire is Christmas Valley and the whole South Lake Tahoe area. If we zoom in here, so not zooming in too far, remember this was the big story that we were covering last week with that red flag warning, with those strong southwesterly wind gusts, with the spot fires we were getting on the western and eastern edges of Christmas Valley. This was one of the, I would say, scariest wildfire situations that I've personally done updates and forecasts for, because as you could see, we had fire on both sides of Christmas Valley being pushed by those southwesterly winds closer towards South Lake Tahoe as well. And in the most recent fire perimeter data, you can see the amazing job that they were able to do in this area. Notice where you see the fire perimeter, it comes down to where we have streets, and then right where the streets are seems to be where that fire perimeter ends. And again, this isn't perfect data. It's just the best that we have to work with, but does show the amazing job that was done by the wildland firefighters, especially in this Christmas Valley and South Lake Tahoe area, where the fire perimeter just came right into this area, and then amazingly they just kept it out of the communities themselves. There's Myers. That was one of the key spots that I was worried about. But as of right now, the most recent fire perimeter looks like we're still good there. Do notice that it continued to move up towards the northeast. They basically were able to just herd the fire around South Lake Tahoe. So amazing job done there. Now, one thing that I will say might be easiest to actually see it on this map is, according to this fire perimeter, two things that we were talking about was the possibility of it connecting with the Tamarack fire or moving into Nevada. And it looks like as of right now, it has not done either of those things. Big reason for that was how much it's calmed down over the last 5 days, thanks to the amazing efforts by all the CAL FIRE personnel. So if we actually want to see the updated numbers, you'll notice 217,000 acres. So that might not actually mean all that much, because it's all kind of perspective. So one thing we can do is go back to my Twitter, and I think one of the last posts I did, let's see, this was September 2nd, Caldor Fire was 211,000 acres. So that puts that number into perspective. In the last 5 or 6 days, it has only grown by about 7,000 acres. So that's as much as we're seeing in maybe an hour to 2 hours at some points on the Caldor Fire. So fire spread has significantly calmed down on the Caldor Fire. If we look at the spread itself, this shows us where the most recent activity has been, and actually the whole fire progression for the Caldor Fire. Where you see that bluish and purple color, that was where the fire began. On August 15th to August 16th, that was when it went from about 5,000 acres to 60,000 acres and went through the Grizzly Flats area. Then, with the predominant southwesterly winds, you can see that the predominant direction of fire growth was towards the northeast, where you get into that orangish and reddish color. That's where the most recent growth has been. So you notice where you get into that black color, that's the last 3 days, and it's actually hard to find where that black color is because there's been so little growth over the last few days. But where you do notice a lot of growth is that orange and red color there. That's that red flag warning that we were covering last week. And the most recent areas that have seen some activity looks like it's that north spot that we're covering going towards Wrights Lake, and then also that area to the north of Kirkwood, but again, doesn't look like it's actually gone into Kirkwood as of right now. And given the current fire behavior, it doesn't look like there's any as much of a concern there as we were seeing in the past. But again, we do have those red flag conditions that have popped back up. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on the Caldor Fire, because we've seen in the past when those gusty winds come in, it does have the potential to flare the fire back up. So when it comes to the percent containment, one sec, I'm going to take a sip of water. So when it comes to the percent containment, you can see amazingly we are up to 53%. if we want to see where that containment is, first thing you'll probably notice is that it's the entire western edge of the fire is in that black line, which represents where the fire is contained. And then I do know in that most recent Caldor Fire update, they were hoping to get that black line to the north of Kirkwood over the next 3 to 4 days. They're hoping to turn that into a contained area. But I think the most amazing place to see where we have gained containment is around Christmas Valley, South Lake Tahoe, Myers, basically stretching around the entire part of the fire that we were the most concerned about last week. So amazing work done there. And I believe I have a map that actually zooms into that. So zooming in there, you can see where they've put in a lot of these lines. So a lot of lines on that northern edge that was extending towards Wrights Lake, but where you see those black X's, that's where we have some new containment in there. And then just huge amount of containment protecting areas like Myers and South Lake Tahoe, Christmas Valley, where you see those black lines really separating where the fire was and where about a couple thousand of our structures are. Now, key spot that I'm going to watch over the next couple of days is Kirkwood, because that is a spot where they're hoping to gain that containment in maybe the next 3 to 4 days. So with the Caldor Fire again, I know I'm saying a lot of good news that the fire's calmed down. We're not seeing a lot of heat or activity. But with that being said, you always have to stay updated with the most recent evacuation warnings and orders. I'll just show the map quickly right now. Again, I don't believe this is the complete map. Notice it doesn't go into Nevada, and at one point we did have those evacuation orders going into Nevada. So again, this isn't the complete evacuation map, but I do just like to show it because I can't possibly go over all the individual evacuation orders. So this gives just a basic snapshot. Now, one thing that I do see, and I would say is the best thing to see, is that around South Lake Tahoe last week, or even the last time that we looked at this, all of that was under mandatory evacuation orders in that red color. And you can see that much of South Lake Tahoe has actually transitioned back into the evacuation warning. So I would say that's good news. It looks like we're trending in the right direction there. And what I'm just hoping is that over the next couple of days, with this red flag warning in place, with the gusty winds, that the progress we've made over the last 5 to 6 days will continue to hold. I would hate to see those gusty winds come in, flare something back up, or even worse, new dry lightning fires starting. So again, looking good, but certainly going to have to keep our eye on it. And hopefully more of those evacuation orders turn into warnings and then into basically nothing over the next week to 2 weeks, depending on how it goes. So when it comes to the structures destroyed, you can see that that number is unfortunately up from the last time we looked at it. Looks like the Caldor Fire is up to 1,000 structures destroyed, and that wasn't that big of a surprise there that we were going to see that number come up, because we were waiting on a large amount of damage assessment reports to come back from where we knew the fire had gone through some structures in the past. So just clicking in here, I'll just kind of show you how to use this map. So then you can click on this in the description. Again, most of the links that I show in this video, I put in the link in the description of this video. This is one of the links that you'll be able to find. So if you're local and you're interested in how your structure may have fared throughout the Caldor Fire, you can actually click on this link. You can zoom in here. For example, in Phillips, this was an area where unfortunately we did have a large amount of structures destroyed. I should try to turn the legend on here. So red is greater than 50% destroyed. If you see a black structure, that's where there's no damage. So you can see in this Phillips area, that's where we had a large amount of structures destroyed. Clicking on the structure itself, you can then click on the photo, and then it actually shows you what the structure itself looks like. So again, this link is in the description, and I think the overall takeaway from this map is, again, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by this wildfire. There's, as of right now, 1,000 structures destroyed, and I know thousands of people are still evacuated from their homes. I personally know that can be very challenging. So again, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected. So We did get some new information up here towards, I believe that's Echo Summit right here. Again, this was the first day that we were really following this fire in real time when it pushed over Highway 50 and then was jumping onto the western and eastern edge of Christmas Valley. And that is some new information there. It looks like we did have a rather large amount of structures get destroyed as that fire pushed down. But again, not a huge surprise there, as we were actually seeing some footage when we were following this in real time where cars were driving north on Highway 50, and when they were panning their camera up to the left side of the road, we could actually see some of these structures on fire. But where the good news comes in, and what I think is the most amazing news, is that if you look around Christmas Valley itself, you can maybe find 1 or 2 structures that are in that red color where they're destroyed, and thousands of structures that show no damage whatsoever. So again, I think the takeaway for the Caldor Fire is amazing work done by our Cal Fire personnel and representatives. If we actually want to see how many resources are still on this fire, you can see we have 4,532 personnel still on this fire. So I know that even though there is some challenging conditions over the next couple of days, luckily we still have a large amount of resources which will act to diminish any of those areas of the fire that do flare back up. So with the Caldor Fire, I'd say the overall summary is much calmer behavior over the last few days. Overall, amazing job done by the Cal Fire and U.S. Forest personnel to really, I think, avoid what could have been one of the worst wildfire situations in the history of California if that had completely pushed into South Lake Tahoe. But with all that being said, again, we have those thunderstorms coming through Northern California right now, so we're going to have to keep a very close eye on it. Man, already losing my voice and only about 20 minutes into the video. I'm going to take another sip of water, see if I can readjust here. Alrighty, so next fire that we're going to talk about is the Dixie Fire. But before we get into the Dixie, I should just explain exactly what is going on with the fire weather forecast, because again, that's the big story throughout the course of this video. It's that red flag warning that is over all of almost all of Northern California right now. That's what we're mostly concerned about. It's that thunderstorm potential, which has the potential to bring some dry lightning, and also the potential to bring some gusty erratic winds as well. So just looking at the satellite imagery, you can actually see those thunderstorms coming in over the last few hours. Better way to look at that is this is called sandwich right here. Zooming in there earlier in the day, you just see some clouds. There you can actually see the smoke plume coming off of the Dixie. And then we're starting to see some of those thunderstorms pop up now. So we're just going to have to keep an eye on this map throughout the course of this video to see if we can actually see any of those thunderstorms. And we'll have to also follow the lightning tracker to see if we can see any lightning coming into Northern California already, even though this event will be continuing all the way into tomorrow morning. So where this is coming from, there's kind of two different things going on here. You notice that large high pressure system over basically the entire western half of the U.S. That's what was keeping our conditions somewhat calm over the last couple of days. When that was directly over California, we had much weaker winds, which is why that red flag warning disappeared for a number of days there. But there's a few things going on which is causing that red flag warning to push back in. So on one aspect, you could think about the circulation around this high pressure system. You have clockwise circulation. So on the bottom of this high, it's bringing the southeasterly winds, which takes some of that monsoonal moisture from Arizona, pushes into California. You can just imagine it spinning clockwise right there, takes some of that moisture from Arizona, pushes it into California. And then the other thing that we have going on is this trough starting to build into more Oregon, but a little bit of Northern California as well. What that's doing is bringing some gusty winds with it, and then it's also bringing some moisture as well. So if we want to actually see some of that moisture coming in, so at first, mostly dry air over California. With that high pressure system, you can actually see the clockwise rotation in those arrows right there. And then right there, you can see some of that moisture being pushed in from Arizona. But then you see even more moisture dipping down with that low pressure that is going through Northern California. I think that's the big part of the story that's bringing a lot of that moisture in and that possibility for some thunderstorms. So before we look at the kind of fire weather big three, the temperature, winds, and humidity, first thing I want to check out is the thunderstorm potential itself. So as of right now, you can see still not showing all that much for Northern California, but then as we get into about 8 p.m. tonight, looks like it starts to pick up a little bit. And then as we get into 11 p.m., looks like there's significant thunderstorm possibility from the East Bay down possibly all the way into the Santa Cruz Mountains. Looking out my window right now, I certainly see that moisture, that upper level moisture has moved in. I'll be interested to see if maybe we even hear some thunder throughout the course of this video. Looks like it's coming in more as we get into the later hours tonight though, and then even into tomorrow morning as well. It actually looks to be picking up. So I think one of the key spots I'm going to be watching is the North Bay. Again, that's a place where we have a lot of dry fuels, and we know there's a history of wildfire danger. Looks like there is the possibility for some thunderstorm activity relatively in that area. But then as we get into about 5 a.m. in the morning, you see that thunderstorm potential starts to shift more to the east. Let's see if we can actually see that on this map right here. Looks like it kind of, you can imagine, you could fill in the blanks here. It starts almost in Northern California off the coast in the Pacific Ocean. Then it moves through like a wave right there, and then finally ends up in Northern California before moving off, and California returns to dry air. So looks to be about 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. is the key times for that thunderstorm potential. But there is still some potential all the way into tomorrow afternoon, possibly in the Sierras. Although it looks like the key spot there was at about 2 to 5 a.m. where we're going to have to really keep an eye on any thunderstorms, dry lightning, and the gusty erratic winds that might come to areas like the Caldor Fire. Again, that was one of the big things that we're talking about here. Caldor Fire's right here. You can imagine there's a lot of areas on this fire that might just be smoldering as of right now. These thunderstorms could bring in some very gusty erratic winds, which could flare up some of those areas once again. But even more than that, it could lead to some lightning as well, which has the potential to start some new fires. So something we're also going to have to look at. So you can also see that the thunderstorm potential goes right over the Dixie Fire as well. You can see Lake Almanor right there, Honey Lake right there, and the thunderstorms directly over that area at about 5 a.m. So looks, and again, this isn't perfect. This is just based on model data, and thunderstorms are one of the hardest things for that model data to predict. So again, exact timing and location, not exact, but it does show the relative trend that starting right about now into tonight and into tomorrow morning and even into tomorrow afternoon a little bit, there is the ongoing potential for thunderstorms. So one thing that I do want to focus on is the winds that we're going to be expecting, and we'll actually zoom up more. Actually, we'll zoom out, click through the thunderstorm potential, see if it has gusty erratic winds where we have those thunderstorms. Looks like that is the case, because at 5 a.m. you usually see very calm winds, but it looks like when those thunderstorms come through, again, this was the exact time that we saw it over the Caldor Fire and the Dixie Fire. Looks like it's predicting some winds up above 30 miles per hour, which kind of tells you why we have that red flag warning in place right now. So thunderstorm potential, has the potential to bring some lightning and gusty winds as well. Let's see if once that thunderstorm potential is gone, yeah, it looks like as it's on its way out, again, it's a cold front moving through, and with that cold front, it will be bringing some gusty winds with it. You can see in the Sierras here, some winds up above 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts tomorrow afternoon. So quite a few things to think about in the weather forecast. One, it's how the thunderstorm winds could flare up some of the fires that we already have. And two, it's the potential for new lightning fires starting and then being able to rapidly spread due to the gusty winds that'll be associated with those thunderstorms as they come through. So one thing that I do want to see is the humidity, because I'm wondering if some of that moisture is going to be finding its way to the ground. Usually when you hear a dry thunderstorm, that means all the moisture is just up in the atmosphere, and any rain that you would get would just evaporate before it gets to the ground. So that usually means relative humidity on the ground is going to be relatively dry as well. Just clicking a random place in the Dixie Fire, looks like we have fairly poor, actually looks like tonight we're going to have some decent relative humidity recoveries. So looks like some of that moisture from those thunderstorms could be finding its way down to the ground. Again, not saying big rainfall there, but some of that relative humidity. And then as we get into tomorrow afternoon, some of that moisture could be sticking around, which again would diminish some of the wildfire threat, because you'd much rather see 25% relative humidity, or even better, 58% relative humidity than the 9 to 10% that we usually see over these fires. So again, just the summary there. Red flag warning 5 p.m. today until 11 p.m. on Friday. Possible fire starts from lightning with little rainfall. Potential for rapid spread of fire this afternoon to tomorrow. And basically that red flag warning, I would say it's more widespread than that last one that we're following. Big thing that I'm going to be looking at is how those gusty erratic winds interact with the fires we already have. And then also I'm going to keep a close eye on if any new fires start, particularly in the North Bay. Again, big knock on wood there, but that was one of the spots where we saw those thunderstorms coming through tonight and into early tomorrow morning. And that is an area where we have some critically dry fuels right now. So definitely, basically just going to be keeping a close eye on all of Northern California as we move forward. So one of the key spots that I will be following as we move forward is the Dixie Fire, because that is, I would say, the most active wildfire that we have in California right now. Again, you can't really see it all that much because of those clouds that have pushed into Northern California. Again, that would act to keep our temperatures down somewhat when you get more cloud cover like that. But some of those clouds are going to be turning into thunderstorms over the next few hours. So that will bring some challenges of its own to the Dixie Fire. So I just want to see the natural color fire here, because that's actually an easier way to see the Dixie Fire. Again, the Dixie Fire goes all the way down. We'll look at the full fire perimeter in a second here, but just want to show where it's the most active today. Clearly it's on that northern section of the fire, which seems to be very active, and that right there I think explains why we do have some new evacuation orders in place for the Dixie Fire. It's with those winds, with the warm temperatures, with the very dry fuels, and the activity that we have on the northern edge of the fire, that's leading to a large amount of fire growth that we'll check out in a second. One thing that I want to show though is, one, that the entire Dixie Fire is covered in that red flag warning. Just zooming in here, you can get a brief idea of where a lot of that fire activity has been recently. Let's turn the red flag off for 1 second. It's where you see those red dots right there. That's where you see the most recent activity. The spot that they were talking about the most throughout the Dixie Fire update this morning was Old Station right there, because you can see number of hotspots reaching out towards the north right there. But again, that's just based on satellite data, so not perfect there, but does give a general idea of where the most growth on the Dixie Fire is currently. You notice not seeing many hotspots around Lake Almanor, around the entire southern edge of the fire. Not even as many on this northeastern finger as we were seeing in previous days. It's really that northern section that looks to be extremely active as of right now. One other way to see that, and again, take this map with a grain of salt because this is also just based on satellite data, but it's always one of the best ways to see where the fire is active because it shows where the satellite is picking up heat. So just looking at the fire perimeter, you can see where those red dots are. That's where the most recent growth has been, or where the recent heat is being picked up by the satellites. One good thing I would say, not seeing all that much heat on the eastern finger of the fire. That was one of the last spots that we were following in the video, I believe on the second or the third, but clearly a very large amount of growth on that northern section. That's one of the largest heat signatures that we've seen possibly even this season for one area of a fire. And again, take this with a grain of salt. We'll look at the most recent fire perimeter data in a second, but sometimes it is useful to show this because if I am about to show you a fire perimeter map from 5 or 6 hours ago, it isn't all that helpful if there's been a massive amount of growth in the last 5 or 6 hours, as it looks like there has been on the Dixie Fire. Big reason for that is as that low starts to come in right there, you can see the direction of those winds, southwesterly to southerly. What that's doing on our fire is just pushing it towards the north and the northeast. And again, there are some new evacuation orders in place. So just keeping that in mind, that we have had a large amount of growth over the last few hours, it is still, I would say, more useful to look at the most recent fire perimeter because, again, that is higher quality data, I would say, and more accurate. So one thing that we can do here, again, this is going to be somewhat hard to see because the fire perimeter itself is so large. But I want to turn off the most recent data. So the last time we looked at this was September 3rd. Then I took a number of days off to just focus on my master's thesis. If we look at where the recent growth has been, you notice I noticed 2 key spots. You may notice more, but 2 key spots that I noticed. One is down in this area. Again, no surprise there. That was one of the top spots that we were following, as in our last video, was this edge of the fire that, again, there was a couple days in a row that grew about 30,000 acres. And then we were following it as it was pushing down this escarpment. I think I'm saying that right. And looks like it may have crossed Highway 395 in one little section there. But again, that fire perimeter data isn't perfect. It looks like for the most part, they were able to keep it on the Dixie Fire side of Highway 395. But just zooming in there, you can see where that growth has been over the last few days. And one thing I actually want to point out, this is the other reason that this map is so helpful, is you can go to the recent fire perimeter, and then you can also look at the fact that it kind of paints a picture of why that area of the fire did finally calm down. It almost looks like a puzzle piece to, it's labeled as the Sugar Fire, but that we could call that the Beckworth complex right there. Again, that was one of the first fires that I covered this season, and this is a pretty good example for why fire is actually good for fire. When you have a fire like the Beckworth complex at the beginning of the season, cleared out a lot of these fuels, and in some cases there's also containment lines put in place right there. So then by the time the Dixie Fire came up to it, basically stopped in its tracks. Looks almost like a puzzle piece with the Beckworth complex or the Sugar Fire, depending on how you want to name it. But I would say that is actually something that significantly worked in our favor in that section of the fire. That was, again, an area that was growing rapidly for a number of days there. So good to see it's calmed down, partly because of the amazing work done by all the CAL FIRE representatives, but then also partly because of the Beckworth complex already cleared out a large amount of those fuels, and some containment lines I'm sure were able to be reused in that section of the fire. But clearly the spot where we do still have a lot going on is on this northern section of the Dixie Fire. Lots of hot spots there. Again, let's just check out Old Station. Not sure that it's going to actually find it right here. So again, take this with a grain of salt because it's based on satellite data. As of right now, though, doesn't look like it's gone through Old Station. I know this was one of CAL FIRE's big priorities. Let's see if we can see it here as well, because I was seeing some reports that it crossed the Highway 44 in this area. And again, we do know that there are some new evacuation orders in place. So there's Old Station right there. Yeah, definitely seeing some of those hot spots around this area. So let's actually zoom into it on this map, make sure we have the most recent one clicked on. So this, just zooming out so you can get a good idea of the fire. Again, it's sometimes hard to look at the Dixie Fire because it's so large at this point. So we looked in that area. Seems to have calmed down because it's moved into the Beckworth complex. But on this northern area, this is one of the most active spots in possibly one of the most active spots we've seen throughout this wildfire season is this northern section as of right now. So let's see, compared to a few days ago, you can see where a large amount of that growth was, and it's where the fire appears to be the most active right now. So just zooming in here, again, this paints the picture of why you can't always, why these maps are extremely useful, because again, you can actually zoom all the way in, you can check out the topography, you can see how steep the terrain is, you can get a good idea of where the fire is, and it's the most high resolution data. But if people are actually trying to find out where the fire is right now, again, it's not exactly accurate. It's also not accurate to show this, even though it's more accurate data, because we've had so much growth in the last couple of hours. So as of this morning, I believe that's when this fire perimeter data was from, you can see all the way down here. But if we look at where it's picking up those hot spots right now, again, this map is showing it to the east of Old Station and crossing Highway 44 in some places. And then this map right here is also showing it well past Highway 44. But again, this is why there's also a caveat on this map, is just because it shows the fire perimeter over these areas. We've seen in the past that this can be off by a mile or two, and often doesn't mean everything underneath this has burned. In most cases where there's structures, they're able to actually get structure protection around those areas. But this does paint the picture that there has been a very large amount of growth towards the north throughout the last couple of hours on the Dixie Fire. So again, that's why we have some new evacuation orders in place. If we look at where the most recent fire perimeter map is from, again, all to the south of Highway 44, and roughly where we're picking up some of those heat signatures right now, you can see major changes going on the Dixie Fire. Lots of growth towards the north right there. And one other way to see it, so we can actually see it with our own eyes, is zooming in there. You can see how much this northern edge of the Dixie Fire has flared up over the last couple of hours with those gusty winds coming through. So looking at the Dixie Fire, let's actually update this. Again, they usually update the number at 7 o'clock. So yeah, not updated yet, but right now it's at 927,000 acres. I was hesitant to say that we're going to go to 1 million acres and become the largest wildfire in the history of California, but how things are going right now, it looks like we're most likely going to get there on the Dixie Fire. If we want to see where a lot of that growth has been recently, again, where the purple color is, that's where the fire started. And where the reddish color is, that's where the most recent growth has been. Again, a lot of growth on that eastern side that has moved into the Beckworth complex. Seems like things are improving there. But the next time they update this map, we're going to have a very large amount of growth on this northern section here based on what appears to be happening over the last couple of hours. So just going back here, you can see we are at 59% containment. And where you see that containment again, there are some areas that are looking great on this fire. All around Lake Almanor, you can see that black line, all black line around Westwood, all black line to the north of Quincy, around Taylorsville, except maybe that one little red spot right there. The entire southwestern and almost entire southern edge of the fire is in that containment area. So lots of good things to see. Susanville looking much better, Janesville looking much better. But we do still have those spots that we're watching. Still going to keep a very close eye on that east zone there because, again, with those gusty winds coming in this afternoon with the thunderstorm threat, there is the potential for things to start to flare up there. But then even more so, I'm watching the northern edge here because we're seeing it make a very fast northern push throughout the last couple of hours. So just looking back here, again, there are some new evacuation orders in place. That's all I'll really say because I can't go through all of these. One thing that I can do, I believe I have the map up. So let's just make sure this is updated. Oh, one thing that I didn't say earlier, but I am trying to make sure that the screen doesn't buffer too much, so I only have one screen open right now. So apologies if anybody's been posting questions or comments in the live chat. I haven't looked at the live chat once throughout this video. Once we look at some of the major fires, then I'll go to the live chat, scroll through, see if I can find any questions that may have come up. But again, on the Dixie Fire, you can see where those evacuation orders are in place. Again, we do still have a large amount of orders in that eastern zone right there, south of Honey Lake, and right along Highway 395 there as well. And then, no surprise there, some of the new ones, I believe, are popping up on the northern side of the fire, where we're seeing the most amount of growth as of right now. So when it comes to those evacuation warnings and orders, again, I prefer not to go over those in my videos because I think that's the number one thing you should always get straight from the source, just to remove any possibility for confusion with a middleman there. And I put all the most important links for that we go over in this video in the description of this video, so you can find basically all the links that I show throughout this video there. So just scrolling down here, damages and losses, you can see Dixie Fire is at 1,282. This is another link that I put in the description of this video where you're actually able to zoom in here. And let's say you're interested in where we had that spot fire that went near Janesville. You can actually zoom in, click on a structure itself. The red structures show where it's destroyed. Black structures show there's no damage. You can click on the structure and it even shows a photo as well. So again, that link is in the description if you're interested in finding that kind of information. And as always, thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires. But one thing that I will say, that I would say is some good news, is we still have a massive amount of resources on this fire. Almost 5,000 personnel right now. So you can imagine those personnel are working very hard to try to control this huge flare-up that we have on the Dixie Fire as of right now. So now I do quickly want to actually, let's zoom out here, see if we can see some of those heat signatures on the other fires. Again, believe that's Monument right there, River Complex right there, Antelope Fire up here. You notice, biggest thing I notice is the Antelope Fire. This is one that basically looked out in the past, and this is a perfect example of what I was talking about before, where with those gusty winds that come in with that red flag warning and that thunderstorm potential, it brings the potential for areas that looked calm in the past to re-flare back up again, and that certainly seems to be what's happened on the Antelope Fire. I almost stopped covering the Antelope Fire because not much had happened on it in maybe a week or two, but it looks like as those gusty winds have come in, it has re-flared up the fire, and we're picking up a very large heat signature on the Antelope Fire as of right now. Again, I believe you can see that large smoke plume. Yeah, it's pretty hard to see because of all the clouds, but Antelope Fire has certainly flared back up again. So let's go to INSUWeb. And again, I do know there are some new evacuation orders in place on both the Antelope and the Dixie, possibly some of our other fires as well. Those are just the two that I know for sure. So looking at the Antelope, that one shows 98,000 acres right there, but I imagine it's at 100,000 acres as of right now. And again, the reason we're concerned about that one is you can see the large amount of structures to the northeast here, and if we look at the winds, the predominant wind direction is from the southwest. The reason for that is as that low pressure system comes through right there, you can see how it brings those southwesterly winds. Around that, it has counterclockwise rotation, so on the southern edge of that low, it's bringing those southwesterly winds in, which you can see right there, relatively strong over both the Dixie Fire and the Antelope Fire over the last couple of hours. Going to be picking up even more tomorrow afternoon as the thunderstorm potential continues in the early morning hours, and then some of those strong winds stick around throughout the day. So I'm certainly going to be watching that area closely as it looks like it's flared back up, and we're going to continue to see some of those southwesterly winds there. Now, one thing, yeah, you can see where we had the hot spots in the past on the Antelope Fire to current heat detections. Lots of growth towards the north there. It just perfectly paints the picture of how fire can be pushed forward by those southerly and southwesterly winds. You can also see that the river complex that one's looked pretty active for quite some time now, but then we also see a fair bit of activity on the Monument Fire as well. Looking at the detections, still seeing some heat on that western edge right there. So I hadn't looked for any recent evacuation orders on the Monument Fire itself, but it does look like we have some more heat in that area. Now, if we want to see that a little bit better, we can go back to Google Earth, go on over to the Monument Fire again. Don't be alarmed by the blue color. That shows cloud cover. But let's see how much it's grown in the last 5 days. So there's September 3rd. You can see the biggest thing I notice is that area on the southwestern edge of the fire to the west of Hay Fork. That's where some new growth has been since September 3rd. And that's also where we're seeing some of those active hotspots right now. So again, blue is just cloud cover right there. The reddish and yellow shows where that fire perimeter is. Most of that new growth has been to the west of Hay Fork, but as of right now, it looks like it has stayed out of much of the community itself, but we're going to have to keep a very close eye on it because, again, we do have some very challenging conditions. it's an area of the fire that has been active recently, and there are a large amount of structures in that area. So be sure to stay updated on all the most recent evacuation warnings and orders in that area. So one thing that I just realized I forgot to show on the Dixie Fire was the forecast from Wharf S Fire for the next 2 days. And I'm going to be very interested to see how this model predicts the fire activity with those thunderstorms coming in. So again, we run this out of the San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory. Right now, it's going to show what winds it was predicting. Again, mostly those southerly winds on the northern edge of the fire right there. That is exactly in line with what we've seen throughout the day today because of all that growth we've seen to the north there. Again, just pausing it. Oh, right. So this is actually just a screen recording of the model because in the past, every time I actually showed the model, it would basically end my live stream because, again, it's including fuel, moisture, topography variables. We have these wind streams. It simulates how the wildfire creates its own weather and then how the weather interacts with the wildfire. So very complex model, so I can't show it live in my videos anymore because it basically just takes up too much computational power. But if we pause it and look at where it was predicting the growth throughout the day today, again, the area that I was predicting the most growth was pretty spot on, mostly predicting it in the northern edge there, but just based on where we're seeing the recent heat detections, and again, that information isn't perfect, but it appears we've had far more growth towards the north of the Dixie Fire than we were originally expecting. So now is when the thunderstorms have officially come in. Again, it did do a really good job of simulating those southerly winds, pushing that fire forward on the northeastern section. Again, to see that better, wonder if I could zoom in. Now, I can't zoom in on this. That's a bummer. But now I want to see, as those thunderstorms come in right now and into tonight, you can see some of those gusty, erratic winds right there, where the wind streams seem to be going in all directions, seem to get very fast for a second there. That is the model simulating those thunderstorms coming through, where you get the very gusty, erratic winds. So the model itself isn't predicting any massive growth on really any part of the fire, but as we're seeing with those gusty, erratic winds, with those thunderstorms, we are already seeing what appears to be a large amount of growth on that northern edge of the Dixie Fire. So I think that's my main concern in California right now, because again, that's the area of California where we're seeing the most fire activity. And again, looking at the structures, we do have some structures in that area. But again, just because there's structures underneath that hotspot doesn't mean the structures have burned. That's the caveat I have to say when I showed this map. But this map is more accurate right now than the most recent fire perimeter map that we were looking at on Google Earth, because we've had so much growth over the last couple of hours. So I think that's going to be an area that we have to watch very closely right there. And then also we have to now include the Antelope Fire. Again, you'll notice that the Antelope Fire wasn't even in the title of this video because I was just used to not covering it. But then right before I went live, I made sure to check Twitter, and I saw there was new evacuation orders on the Antelope Fire, and you can see why. There has been a large flare-up over the last couple of hours with those strong southwesterly winds, which with that red flag warning in place. So looks like those are two areas that have some new evacuation orders in place right now, and areas that we're going to have to watch closely over the next few days. So I did notice that I didn't go over some of the other fire numbers here. Again, on the Monument Fire, that one is at, it is now officially over 200,000 acres, 45% containment. I believe that's the one for the River Complex. Where is that? River Complex is 170,000 acres, 23% containment. The big two that we're talking about, though, is Dixie Fire, which is most likely over. I'm interested to see what this looks like once they update it again with all that new growth to the north. But right now it's showing 928,000 acres. And the Antelope Fire, going to be interested to see what they upgrade that to. Right now around 100,000 acres. So with all that being said, now I will take my first look at the live chat to see if any questions or comments popped up throughout the course of this video. Again, apologies for not looking at the live chat throughout the whole course of this video. But I was trying to reduce the buffering that we've seen in the past. Oh, one thing that reminded me that we haven't done yet is, and I'll close some tabs because this usually takes a fair bit amount of data too, is see if we can actually see what this fire looks like. Or see what some of these thunderstorms possibly look like. Oh, and then we'll also check and see the lightning tracker. So it looks like very hazy skies right there. Seeing a lot of interesting clouds. Not seeing any with showing directly where that smoke plume is. I think a better way to see the thunderstorms versus looking at a time lapse of one of those is again looking at the sandwich values right here. I want to close that out. Where you can see just some clouds earlier in the day, and then once this reloads, you'll start to see some of those denser clouds coming up. Certainly see it in Southern California, where I saw somebody in the live chat said they are actually picking up some rain there. Looks like those thunderstorms are starting to come in, and again, based on the model data, it looked like the strongest thunderstorm possibility was coming in at about 2 to 5 in the morning. So what we're seeing right now is really just the start of that thunderstorm event. So now, just want to go back over, check and see if there are any important Twitter updates. We'll actually go to Fire Scanner. That's one of the best spots to get information. So where I left off was Antelope Fire was requesting some aircraft, but looks like they've now had to cancel that aircraft due to the visibility. Notice a lot more Antelope Fire posts right here than we were seeing in the past. There's that red flag warning that we've been talking about throughout the whole course of this video. 5 p.m. today to 11 a.m. on Friday. With those thunderstorms coming through, that has the potential to bring some gusty erratic winds, some dry lightning as well. And right there, there's the new evacuation orders and warnings for the Dixie Fire as of 1 hour ago. So again, if you're in, I believe that's in the northern edge of the fire. Yeah, north of Highway 44. That's where that kind of goes along with what we were talking about on the Dixie Fire, with a lot of that new growth being on the northern edge there. Around the Caldor Fire, though, that's where some of the good news comes in. That's where some of those orders were reduced to warnings. And then just covering lots of that red flag activity, and seeing some notifications here. So one good thing that you can do when watching these videos, if you see any cool posts that you think would help make this video better, is some important information, you can send them to my Twitter, and then I can pull them up in these videos, and then we can go over the most recent information. But right there, I think that sums it up. Antelope Fire experienced considerable growth today under red flag warning conditions. New evac warnings have been issued for some residents of Siskiyou County. So that, I think, is one of the big stories. The other big story going on is that flare-up we have on the Dixie Fire. leading to some new growth in that area as well. So I think when it comes to both of those areas, we're just going to have to stay tuned as we move forward. Again, seeing a lot of activity going on in those areas as of right now. Looks like that activity is going to be continuing throughout the morning hours as those thunderstorms actually pick up in intensity between about 2 and 5 a.m. And then it continues all the way until 11 p.m. Friday, as we do still see some gusty winds into tomorrow afternoon. So again, apologies that I took a few days off there. I had to focus on the master's thesis, trying to wrap it up by the end of this month. But with this red flag warning being in place throughout tomorrow, I definitely will be back tomorrow as well. So if you want to see another update and forecast for the various California wildfires and the update on what's going to happen as these thunderstorms come through, you can subscribe to this channel, and you can also hit the notification bell so that you actually get notified when I go live. So as always, huge thank you to all the wildland firefighters out there. Thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires, and I hope this video was helpful. I'll see you all again tomorrow, and thanks for watching.